folks. I'm going to do something a little rare. I'm going to show you a little something that the only other plug-and-play system that I have left over. I previously showed off a couple other plug-and-play systems with multiple games inside, and I no longer have those, but I do have this left over because it's somewhat different and somewhat unique, and it isn't a typical something that I would find on an NES multi-cart or whatever the case may be. Kinda, sort of. Some of you folks are probably familiar with the Atari Flashback series of plug-and-play units. The Flashbacks 2, 3, and 4 were made to resemble mini Atari 2600 game consoles and contains a number of Atari 2600 video games. You know, and that sort of thing. Apparently, they're made to mimic the original 2600 games on the original Atari hardware. Allegedly. I say allegedly because I never seen any of those anywhere around here. I've never had a Flashback 2, 3, or 4, and I don't know anybody who has those, and I don't know anybody that sells those. So I can't, really ascertain whether this is the case or not. However, because it says Atari Flashback on the title card and the title on the bottom or the top or wherever it is, behind this streaming video thing, did say I was going to do the Atari Flashback, and this is it. The original Atari Flashback classic game console. And look at that, it's a nice little finish on presumably cheaper plastic. Anyways, just a quick show of the console. You have your power button here, you have a reset button there, you have your 9-pin connectors, which you'd think you'd be able to use your old Atari controllers like the 2600 controller or the ProLine 7800 controllers. You cannot. I tried it. You got your AV outputs, and then you got your power. Now I sort of just name dropped the 7800 ProLine because this thing is made to resemble an Atari 7800 Pro system. As a matter of fact, it says in the bottom here, Mini 7800. And does feature a couple of Atari 7800 games. Out of its 5 7800 games and 15 2600 games. For comparison's sake, I do have, right by me, an Atari 7800 Pro system. This is an Atari 7800 Pro system. It is a lot bigger than the Atari Flashback, which is about a quarter of the size. Look at how tiny and small and puny this thing is compared to the 7800. Now, if I had the Atari 5200 around here, which I do not, and quite honestly don't plan on getting one because I don't have the room, that thing would eat this thing alive. That's besides the point and totally irrelevant to this video. Anyways, so the Atari Flashback, as I sort of shot on the side there, contains 20 games, including 5 Atari 7800 games, and the rest of it are 2600 games. I have the manual here, which showcases, and we'll go through the table of contents here. Fast. I'm trying to position this awkwardly. Your classic Atari 700 games comprise Asteroids, Centipede, Charlie Chuck's Food Fight, Desert Falcon, and Planet Smashers, which is supposed to be a really rare 700 game. I guess I'll take your word for it. And then you have your classic Atari 2600 games: Adventure, Air Sea Battle, Battle Zone, Breakout, Canyon Bomber, Crystal Castles, Gravitar, Haunted House, Millipede, Saboteur, which is apparently a unreleased 2600 game, at least at the time, Skydiver, Solaris, Sprint Master, Warlords, Yours Revenge, Credits, Atari website, Technical support US and Canada, terms and services, and page 2. Wait, those weren't games, those are, I was just reading the table of contents. Oops. Oh yeah, so this is the manual. It's your typical your typical plug-and-play schlock color cover, nice plastic, and you got your your bond paper, black and white printing and whatnot. It's definitely more than what the 7800 got, I guess. Low blow, I guess. I like the console anyways. It's one of my early... Anyways. So since it's made to resemble an Atari 7800, the Flashback has appropriately made Pro-Line controllers made to resemble the original Pro-Line 7800 controllers. So you have your little stick, your joystick that's supposed to be the control mechanism, and it's kind of a flimsy little thing. You got your fire buttons, which do different things, presumably. Your pause button, your select button, and again, Atari Flashback, Mini 7800, made in China. That's always good to know. That's always a great thing to know. Again, for comparison's sake, and the only reason why I have this, we have the original 7800 Pro-Line joystick. And again, the Flashback controller, it's sort of the same thing. The only difference, of course, is that the Flashback has the pause and select buttons here, whereas the Atari, well, has this nice silvery finish with the Atari logo on it, and has nothing to indicate that this was made in China. I don't know where this was made in. I don't care. The only thing I know is that this thing doesn't work. Because if I hold it to the side, it won't register. I don't know if I gotta see it. I'm trying to find a replacement 2-button joystick. I'm hoping to get one of those Pro 7800 game pads, or whatever they call them, joy pads or whatever they call them. But I know those are only in Europe and that sort of thing. And again, that's totally irrelevant to this thing. Alright, so I'll give you a couple issues with this thing right off the bat. And it's a couple issues that a lot of people, a lot of purists will take exception to this particular unit. Which, I sort of mentioned that the Flashback 2, 3, and 4 allegedly does a better job of replicating the authentic Atari experience by mimicking the games as if they were played on an actual, apparently the hardware is like a cloned 2600 hardware or something to that extent. I don't know the specifics because, again, I've never seen those things. But I can honestly tell you that whatever they did with those things is certainly not what they did with this. You see, the Atari Flashback, they attempt to advertise that you're playing your old 7800 games and your old 2600 games exactly as you remember them. Bullshit. You see, the Atari Flashback is not a recreation of old Atari hardware, but rather it's a Famiclone, an NES on a chip, a NES clone unit. So what you have are 20 Atari games that are not Atari games, but NES interpretations of Atari games. And as a result, there are some differences, some minor differences that you don't really notice unless you really pay attention, and then there are differences that even I'll notice, and I'm not much of a detail freak, It's like, if it plays well enough for me, I honestly don't care, but if I notice any differences, as a matter of fact, I don't know. So yeah, it's like, because it's NES on a chip, it doesn't replicate the authentic Atari experience. Now, if you've never played Atari before, or you've never played the older Atari systems, this probably means nothing to you. Now, the joysticks, you better learn to love these joysticks if you manage to pick this up. Well, by the way, I got this for $10. So, I don't know. I thought it was a good deal at the time. Then I got an Atari 7800 for the first time in years. And that was a joy for me personally, if I could go on another tangent. Because the Atari 7800 was the very first video game system I've ever had. While everybody else had Nintendos, I had an Atari 7800. eventually I got a Nintendo, a couple of years later, and we started going on Nintendo, and the old 7800 that I had sort of like, I think that was given away to somebody, or certainly knew that we didn't sell it. But anyways, so I eventually got this somewhere along the way, and then sometime later I got the 7800, which meant this thing was almost kind of useless. But in any case, I'm going off on a tangent. The thing with the 7800 was that if you didn't care for the Pro-Line joysticks, you could use your old, alternate joysticks. Like, you could use your old 2600 joysticks, you could use your Sega Genesis pads or something like that. In the case of the Flashback, if you wanted to use your old 2600 joysticks or your Genesis pads or whatever, you're shit out of luck, because this thing isn't compatible with those. It's only compatible with these things, and I think it has to do with that NES on chip thing that I sort of mentioned before. So yeah, it's got a couple points against it, but back when I first bought this for the first time, and even though I knew about the NES on the chip thing, which was kind of a controversial thing, I still wanted to pick it up. I still wanted to try it out. And this will be the first time in years that I actually touched this. This was actually sitting in a box in storage, and I'm pulling this out for the first time, and I did get a couple quick playthroughs of it. And anyways, so this first video, I just wanted to show you the console and sort of ramble a bit. With part 2, I'm going to start actually showing off some of the games. I'm going to do something somewhat slightly different, because even though, it's been years since I had this, I'm pulling out for the first time in years, but I sort of mentioned that sometime afterwards I got myself an Atari 7800, the one you just saw, and somewhere along the line I got a few Atari games, Atari 2600 games. And I have a few here, and like Yar's Revenge and Air Sea Battle and Crystal Castles and Solaris. I already have another video that shows off all the Atari stuff that I have, but the point is that I'm pulling these ones in particular because these games are in the Flashback, which means that in addition to showing you the gameplay from this thing, I can show you gameplay from these things on an Atari 7800, on actual Atari hardware, shall we say, for a bit of comparison, just to have a little fun here. And on top of that, I do have some footage from a couple other games, primarily, a couple of 7800 games that I had at one point but no longer have, and I kind of wish I still do, but I still have the footage for it. For example, Asteroids. I originally did a review for it about a couple of years ago. I still have the footage for that, so I could pull that out and use that as a comparison from the Atari version and the Flashback version. So it's going to be a bit of a nice little experiment, but basically going to go through all 20 games of this original Atari Flashback unit, and maybe I'll throw in some comparison footage to see how this holds up compared to the original versions or equivalents. And as you can see, a brief history of the Atari 7800 and how it was originally intended to be released in '84, but was not. We'll go through the games. You got Adventure, Air Sea Battle, Asteroids, Battlezone, Breakout, Canyon Bomber, Centipede, Crystal Castles, Desert Falcon, Food Fight, Gravitar, Haunted House, Millipede, Planet Smashers, Saboteur, Skydiver, Solaris, Sprintmaster, Warlords, Yar's Revenge, all the initial classics. So we're going to start off with Adventure. Adventure being the classic, adventure game for the Atari VCS, and it looks fairly nice and pretty. And I don't know how well you hear it, but I will show you some sample footage, but the sound effects have a decidedly Nintendo sounding flavor, for lack of a better term. I'll have some better comparison footage, between the to compare to sound clips, but yeah, for the most part, it's Adventure. The controls are fairly
fairly decent for the most part. Nothing really to complain about. So we're just gonna get the sword here and kill this dragon, or put him to sleep. I don't know if that's supposed to be a sword or a spear, but in any case, doesn't really matter. We're just gonna get this key. We're gonna go to the Black Castle, where we're gonna get the Holy Claw of Death, or I forget what the actual term is supposed to call. Anyways, we got a magnet horseshoe type thing, and we got the seizure-inducing chalice, which is the prize of the game. And at least on the default skill setting, which is what I'm going to be playing, I'm not going to try and show off any gameplay skill or anything like that. It's not the point. It's just to show you a bit of footage of how these games play and perform and things of that nature. And we're going to the castle, and that's the seizure-inducing ending. Absolutely brilliant. So that's adventure. There's not a whole lot to it. The only thing, like I said, is that the sounds are... hey, you know what? I've got a good idea. Let's go for interruptive comparison. This is where I start comparing the footage from the Flashback game to their counterparts or some other things. I sort of mentioned that Adventure has some Nintendo-sounding sound effects, and that's only because I recognize the sound effects. I didn't recall at first where, and then I did a bit of digging into one of the multi-carts. The sound effects were originally from this this checkers type thing, which I never figured out how to play. Here, have a listen to these sound clips.
Hello, and greetings from the year 2014. This is Adventure on the Atari 2600, the real deal. Being played on an Atari 7800, but it's pretty much the same thing, and as you can probably hear, the sound effects are drastically different from what was featured on the Flashback. You know, due to the differing hardware and the guts, you know. Anyways, yeah, that's the sound effects. That's all the sound you're going to get for the rest of this video until the very end. So, you know, in the interim between my originally doing this video, you know, a year ago, and my assembling of this, I had gotten a few more Atari games, some of which were featured on the Flashback, and I figured take advantage of, you know, this re-edit and add a few more comparisons. So there's a couple more games that I've added some extra footage of, for comparison's sake, you know, sound-wise, visually-wise, and stuff like that. And I don't have all of them. Like, there's still a few games missing. Like, I don't have Gravitar or anything like that. But it's a bit of extra content, and that's a much more satisfying ending to this adventure than what you get on the Flashback. But yeah, back to your scheduled program.
So the sounds are decidedly NES in quality, as you can probably tell. So next game we're going to look at is Air-Sea Battle, which has this really ugly looking gradient effect, which is a result of the Flashback hardware and not the original game. I'll show you the original game in a short bit, but anyways, we're just going through the different modes. Once again, for the sake of time, we're going to go through the god-awful sound effects. Absolutely horrific sound effects. Anyways, Air-Sea Battle, the whole point is to guide your cannon, aim your cannon, and shoot down the planes. Obviously, this game is best played with a second player, much like Combat, although Combat is a much more enjoyable game. Anyways, we're just gonna shoot this real fast. Yep. Air-Sea Battle controls rather decently on the Flashback controllers, although there is some issues. You know, the joystick has a tendency to get stuck or doesn't respond all that well. I don't know if it's due to age or just because the controllers are kind of crap. It's not that evident here, but it will be evident in a short bit, as we're about to see in a short bit. So we're just going to shoot down some planes, and I can't get over this gradient effect, which looks really, really cheap and garbagey. And there's also the pinkish cloud thing, which I'm not digging actually. And the sound effects are kind of grating to the ears. Ugh. You know, I should have had the foresight to actually cut towards the end of the game to save some time, but I really don't want to, because I really want you to suffer the same pain that I suffered listening to these god-awful sound effects, which yeah, the blinking numbers are to indicate that the round's almost over, or rather not the round, but rather the game's almost over, and it's, you know, try to get some last points in, which I'm sucking at completely, and the game's over. So I scored 36 points in this round. Absolutely brilliant. You know what? Time for another interruptive comparison. It's a crappy name for a segue, but that's what I'm going with. Anyways, this is the Atari 2600 version of Air Sea Battle. Notice how much better it looks in comparison to the Flashback version. There's none of that ugly gradient effects. The sound effects are much more pleasing to the ears. Well, as pleasing as Atari sound effects would get. And going through the different rounds again to see, just to show off the different rounds and how much better they look on the Atari 2600 as opposed to the Atari Flashback thing. And yeah, terrible. Alright, so next up on the list we have Asteroids, and this is the Atari 7800 version of Asteroids as opposed to the 2600 version that most people are probably familiar with. And I will tell you right off the bat, the select button does not work with this thing. If you want to select different modes for the game, you have to use the joystick, which to me is an instant red flag because the select button works on the 2600 games, but none of the 7800 games. But you know what? Let's see how Asteroids handles. Actually, I'm going to show you anyways, but I'm going to tell you anyways. The game handles like ass. You know, the joystick is kind of hard to... difficult to work with. On top of that, the controls, actually the way your ship moves about has been significantly altered. And right now I'm sort of just standing in the middle. It's a popular tactic that I like to use. Oh yeah, you see how the ship just sort of like moves about, stops and goes? That's not how it works in Asteroids. And I died. Also, the rotating asteroids animate rather poorly, and I almost collided with. This is it's jerky. It's one thing that's I haven't sampled was that it's very easy to turn on your hyperspace drive, which is where your ship disappears on screen and reappears someplace else. Usually in the path of an oncoming asteroid where it will instantly be destroyed, much like that. And also the sound effects are god-awful. Absolutely terrible. And again, the asteroid rotations is not as good as the 7800 version. Oh, that was a fluke. But really, it's the controls that ruined this Asteroids game, unfortunately. Which is too bad because the 7800 version of Asteroids is actually quite fun to play, and plays like a dream, as we'll demonstrate right about now actually. So I'm going to show you some footage from the Atari 7800 version of Asteroids, which I actually did a review back in 2010. Good old seizure-inducing Atari logo. See how much happier that sounds? See how much more control and over momentum that I have over my ship? It doesn't just stop and go. See how nicely the asteroids rotate? Absolutely beautiful. Unlike the... oh, I died. Also, I kind of like the score font on the 7800 version, but that's besides the point. Let's move on to Battle Zone, which is an Atari classic, both in arcade format with its vector graphics and the Atari 2600 version, which I've never played. So therefore, there's no comparative footage. I have played the arcade version, and I'm somewhat marginally better in that version than I am here. But for the most part, I died. For the most part, control here is not too bad. Not fantastic. Neither is my gameplay for that matter, but it's somewhat kind of serviceable, although some people have commented that the gameplay in Battlezone on the Flashback is nowhere near as good as the 2600 version. But then again, I wouldn't know since I don't have the 2600 version. I haven't never actually played it on the 2600 actually. I played it on Microsoft Arcade for Windows, which is based on the arcade game.
Yeah, sorry to cut in, but it's time for another comparison, and I wish I had come up with a better label than that to cut in, but you know, that boat has sailed. So, this is Battlezone on the Atari video computer system, the original cartridge. One of the more impressive games on the 2600 library, actually. And this is a drastically different looking game compared to what's on the Flashback. It's a bit darker, but, you know, the gradients are a lot smoother. The ground is, you know, it's not an obnoxious, you know, lime green or bright green or anything like that. You know, animates beautifully, you know, considering the hardware. And when you die, you have a nice little fade out effect that isn't like evident here, unfortunately, but it's a nice little touch.
So now we're going to move on to Breakout, which is another Atari classic arcade game converted to the Atari 2600. And both those versions use a paddle controller to control your paddle to bounce the square off your paddle. And obviously the Atari Flashback doesn't have a paddle controller. It only has the Cripply Mini 7800 Proline controller knockoff things, which obviously doesn't replace a paddle, but apparently I'm doing a lot better than I originally thought. Actually, I was kind of surprised when I first played this, when gathering the footage. I was surprised by how well I was doing. I figured it would be a quick game, but I'm actually doing pretty decent, actually. Much to my surprise, actually. So I guess the jerky nature of the joystick actually helps it, I suppose. But once again, it doesn't beat a paddle controller. That's all I'm really going to say. Yeah, let's... Now again, I'm not going to show any footage because I don't have the 2600 version of Breakout. Presumably because I don't have a paddle controller. And I can't find a copy of Breakout anywhere, even if I wanted to. I do believe Breakout is on the Atari Anthology for PlayStation 2. But playing it with an analog stick is nowhere near as efficient as playing with a paddle controller. Hell, I'll even take the mouse over the analog sticks, but... In any case, moving right along. We are now moving on to Canyon Bomber, which involves bombing a canyon. Well, in some games you bomb a canyon, and other games you bomb submarines. Same basic premise with some minor rule differences. Again, this is a game that's best played with 2 players, although there is a computer-controlled opponent in this game, unlike in air-sea battle and combat. As you probably saw from the submarine segments, it has that ugly gradient effect, which presumably, again, this is another game I don't have on this 2600, It's probably on the anthology disc, but I'm not going to bother to check. But assuming it's the same deal as Air Sea Battle, where the 2600 does a better job of displaying the playfield than this flashback version. Canyon Bomber, is not a whole lot to say about that. Anyways, moving right along. I want to apologize in advance for the ringing sound in the last segment. That was my dog scratching herself. She has since been put to sleep. So we're going to look at the Centipede, which is based on the Atari 7800 version of the game. And not much to say here. Originally, Centipede used a trackball for its control. Obviously, that was not the case with the 7800 version of the game, which only had the Proline controller. For the most part, controller is actually not that bad. It feels a bit jerky at times still, but it's fairly decent for the most part. Can't really complain. Yet. Sounds not all that impressive, actually, to be honest with you, but it is not terrible. Certainly does not sound Atari-like, that much is for sure. And yes, I am indeed sucking right now at the moment. Well, there's not a whole lot to say at this point. It's Centipede. I think anyone who's anybody knows how Centipede works and has played Centipede in some form or another. It's appeared in a variety of forms over the years. If not Centipede, then at least Millipede. Millipede is also on the Flashback, just to remind people. Although it's on a lesser system than the 7800. Actually, I seem to be doing alright for the most part. Not much to say at this point, really. Just waiting for the game to end. I'm still waiting for the game to end. And, we're done. And that's it. That's it, just that. Just for a little fun, let's check out the Atari 7800 version of Centipede. The original 7800 version of Centipede. Which, and the nice seizure-inducing Atari logo. And that's what an Atari game should sound like. Not the other thing. And the gameplay is slightly faster paced, the colors are kind of different. You know, not much to say in that regard. So now, next game we're going to look at is, what's the next game we're going to look at? Crystal Castles. Crystal Castles is actually one of the true tragedies of the Atari Flashback unit, as the crippled controls make this game a chore to play through. You know, you see the teddy bear characters sort of jerking about. I'm having a hard time getting him to move where I want him to move. It's very jerky motion. Hard to control, hard to make him go where I want him to go. Which is... Funny thing, this is the first version of the game that I played. Was this flashback version of Crystal Castles. And this sort of colored my perception of the game. I thought it was crap based on this version. And through some miracle that I cannot understand, I was able to clear the stage. And fortunately, it sort of... And this is not, but really the controllers is what kills this thing. What kills this game specifically. Because it's hard to control your teddy bear character. Which is not the case with the Atari 2600 version of the game, which I'm about to show you in about, right now actually. Another interruptive comparison. Crappy name, but it's all I got, so... In any case, here's the Atari 2600 version of the game. Looks a bit better, sounds a bit better, but most importantly, it controls way better than the flashback version. Look at how easily I'm moving my teddy bear character around, collecting all the lines. I don't know what they're really called. Apparently they're crystals or something like that. I don't recall the actual plot. All I know is that it's a Pac-Man clone. You have to collect them all, avoid the things. But look at how much of an easier time I'm having with this. And this was the 2600 version of the game. One with a much better control setup than the flashback version. The flashback version kills Crystal Castles, and it's rather unfortunate because it seems like a pretty decent game and it's ruined by the crap controls. Okay, so moving right along, we have what's next? Desert Falcon, which is another game, the 7800 version of the game. I don't know if this appeared on any other Atari platforms or any other computer platforms. Definitely what kills this game is the flicker. Again, don't know how this compares with the 7800 version. I've never played it. But the flicker here is pretty bad, as you could probably tell. And pretty much what killed my enjoyment of the game overall. I figure if I had my hands on the 700 version, I'd probably enjoy it a little more. Don't know if I'd be any better at it, but you know. In any case, I'm just gonna fly about here, shoot down some birds, and just die. So I'm gonna walk about, and yeah. I'm moving right along. Not much to say here. It's the flicker that kills the game for the most part, and I died. Beautiful. Okay. And keep going. And you know, it's the flicker really kills the footage here, unfortunately. You know, but it really, you know, it's a game that flickers quite a bit on the flashback, which is sad because a lot of the other games have very minimal flicker. And I'm dead. And I materialize in the building, and I'm dead once more. And I materialize in the building once more. Absolutely brilliant. Again, I don't know if that's the case with the 7800 version. I never played that version, unfortunately. But it certainly colored my perceptions of this game. Food Fight, which is another Atari 7800 classic. A favorite on the Atari 7800 from what I understand. Where the object is to grab the ice cream cone. Again, this is a game where control is actually tolerable with Food Fight than it is with any other game. So this game and Centipede, the controls work just fine. Food Fight looks like a fun game though. If I could find a copy on the 7800, I would definitely pick it up. Definitely a game that I wouldn't mind giving a proper go on the proper hardware. But this flashback version handles alright for the most part. You know, I haven't had any cause to complain in regards to controls or anything like that. But the controller, you know, for more often than not, does cause you to screw up. You know, it's kind of feeble to, you know, it's kind of feeble to bitch about the controls, but, you know, it is that kind of a terrible little thing. And, I often find that hilarious that, the chefs would try to keep you from this ice cream cone, but everything else is expendable. Sure, we caught the kid, let's toss some food at him. We're gonna have to make some more, but fuck that, you know, let's get the kid. Alright, but yeah, that's a fun game. Gravitar. I have no fucking clue how to play Gravitar, excuse my French. No clue whatsoever. And, so, it ends up being one of those games I rarely touch. So, let's have some fun watching me fumble and bumble my way through Gravitar and doing a rather poor job of it. Naturally, I do not have the 2600 version of Gravatar for obvious reasons. And of course, the controls make the ship a lot more jerkier to move around with. But then again, I don't think the controls would have helped much either, because I'm just crap at this game. I mean, I'll admit that much. Okay, so that was Gravatar on the Flashback. Not the best experience I've ever had with here, but anyways, we're moving on to Haunted House, where you're supposed to find parts of a lamp or a tea kettle, as it looks like. And yeah, unfortunately, what did Rolf call that? The lit up thing when he did that Halloween video a few years back? Meat wad. It doesn't look like meat wad. It looks like tofu wad. Wait, that doesn't sound right. Yeah. Anyways, I'm just gonna look for the bits of the map, and this is actually running a little long, so you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna cut ahead here and just get towards the tail end. So I had found my all the pieces of the lamp. We get to the exit, and the whole house flashes and gives the player a seizure. Thus, you win the game, such as it is. Of course, there's different levels of difficulty. You could have an invisible house if you so desire. But again, you know, I'm just playing the absolute default setting just to get it over and done with. Millipede, you could start off at a more advanced level, and if you clear it, you get a crap ton of points. Sound effects are predictably recycled from Centipede on the same system. You know, initially I found it kind of funny that they would include the 2600 version of Millipede but the 7800 version of Centipede, as if the original Centipede game got the updated version, whereas Millipede got the inferior version. But it was only until later on that I discovered that they never made a Millipede for the 7800. I don't know if there's a homebrew for it. I could, you know, maybe. You know, they make homebrews for a whole bunch of stuff. They made a homebrew of Space Invaders, Pac-Man Plus, Super Pac-Man, Pac-Man Junior Pac-Man, a couple other games. I could be wrong, but yeah, this is Millipede. There's not a whole lot to say about it. Obviously, the squares represent your mushrooms and things of that nature. Not much to say in that regard. So, yeah. This is just gonna end this soon. And game over.
And this is where I cut in yet again because, hey, another game to add to the pile. And yeah, anyway, so here's Millipede on the... Again, different sound. This one, compared to the Flashback version, hasn't really changed all that much in terms of the appearance. The Flashback version is a bit brighter, and yeah, I'm not any better at this game, to be honest, in all honesty. But the 2600 version has more flicker. You know, I had to do a little messing around to get the thing to display properly. But yeah, it's Millipede. This pretty much, out of all the games on the Flashback, this one's changed the least. It's pretty much as advertised, so not much else to say in that regard. Anyways, back to the proper audio.
So we're in the home stretch of the Flashback, the last few games, and that's where we're going to cover this last part, along with some concluding thoughts, so it's going to be a little longer part. So here we have Planet Smashers, and this is a rare Atari 7800 video game, hard to find, and bit of mixed opinion with this one. Some people think it's a good game, some people think it's a piece of crap. I do not have enough of. Haven't played enough of the game to form a opinion of any kind. It's a shooter, you know. I like shooters, even the ones that I'm absolutely crap at. I like shooters. They're nice and easy to pick up. What I don't like is the sound effect of your firing of weapons. If there is any game that defines Ear Rape Central, it would be this. Oh dear God. Oh dear. Make it stop, mother. Oh, make it stop. Oh, thank you. Anyways, it's another interruptive comparative thing. Now, the footage you're about to watch was taken from the archives about a few years ago. This is the original Atari 700 version of Planet Smashers. Notice the title screen is a lot larger than the flashback version. And here's some gameplay footage from Planet Smashers on the Atari 7800. Notice how much nicer the laser fire sounds. Yes, it's annoying when you're using the rapid fire function, but it's nowhere near as ear-raping central thing as the flashback version. Not to mention the display on the 7800 version is much nicer than this flashback version. But yeah, it's like in terms of the differences, in terms of the cosmetic changes, Planet Smasher is probably the most notable one of all, and that's all I'm really gonna say in that regard. Moving on. I said moving on. Get that crap. Oh, thank you. All right. Next up, we have I think it's Saboteur, which was an originally an unreleased Atari 2600 video game until somebody's found a prototype and slapped it onto the flashback. Of course, when I say slapping it on the flashback, I meant take the prototype, make an NES conversion of it, make it look like a 2600 video game, and then slap it on the flashback. So, yeah, this is Saboteur. Saboteur would eventually evolve into some other product that would also not see the light of day, as I'm about to show you in some footage that I nicked from a British bloke in a silly suit. Strangely, there's not on his channel, but that's besides the point. Anyways, you're trying to prevent a rocket from launching, because that rocket could mean the end of civilization or something. Anyways, you go about shooting things, and now you're shooting things at this other thing, and I wish I was a little more descriptive. I wish I could explain what the hell's going on, but I'm not quite sure either. I guess that could kind of explain why this game was not released. Oops, the rocket has launched. I only got one thing to do to prevent... yeah. The rocket apparently has a super duper I can't shoot, why not? Oh well. Say, what's this?
From 1984 we have the A-Team for Atari 2600. Deviating slightly from the format of the TV show, this game features BA's giant disembodied head which flies around shooting lasers out of its eyes. You've either got to destroy or protect some kind of space rocket. I can't work out which, it doesn't make any sense. Then after a while you get trapped in a room with what appears to be the A-Team's nemesis Colonel Decker, who you have to bounce lasers off. You'll be unsurprised to hear that this game was never released, probably because it's shit and makes no sense whatsoever. You'll be even less surprised to hear that this was originally a game called Saboteur, and the A-Team graphics were shoehorned in afterwards.
There you go. I'm pretty sure you've all now learned something new and valuable that will change your lives for the better. He lied. In any case, next up we have a skydiver, where the object is to land your skydiving guy on the target, which I did not do. Ah, there we go. Anyways, you drop down from the sky, and this is one of those games where the detrimental controller of the Flashback has no overall bearing on the gameplay. Probably because the gameplay itself is rather limiting and probably wouldn't be that much better on the actual Atari 2600 hardware. Then again, we can't really blame them because back when Atari was big, they made games for that system about anything. Anybody can make a game for the Atari about anything, and anyone did make about anything. Just look it up. And anyways, this is really, really exciting stuff. He lied. And I'm going to move on to something else any day now. There you go, just shifting through the various options, who cares. Next up we have Solaris, a game that... oh god. Solaris Atari 2600 is actually a pretty decent game, and plays great if you know what you're doing. Solaris on the Atari Flashback, on the other hand, is not so much. You can see the animation, the scaling of the various planets that you get to blow up. Why isn't this game called Planet Smashers, by the way? But in any case, the various planets you get to blow up don't scale as nicely as they do on the 2600 version, as we're about to see. The controls are pretty jerky. You notice that I don't stay on the map grid thing for too long at a couple of points. Sound effects are complete ass. If there's anything worse than crappy Atari sounds, it's crappy NES replications of crappy Atari sounds. Fortunately, Solaris has some pretty good sound quality on the 2600. None of which is evident in this version. This is not Ear Rape Central like Planet Smashers on the same console, but it's pretty damn close, that much I could tell you. You know what, screw the rest of this game, let's just go right to the interruptive comparative thing and show you some footage from the original Atari 2600 version of Solaris. And here we go. This is greatness, people. This is an absolute beauty. Look at those classic Atari sound effects. Look at how my firing shot sounds like a firing shot and not a pea shooter. A common problem with a lot of pea shooters in NES games. Notice how the scrolling is somewhat marginally better. Scrolling, excuse me, I meant smooth scaling, that's what I meant. The explosions sound nicer, even though they're fireworks. Nope. Anyways, moving right along. Next up we have Sprint Master. Sprint Master. There we go. Sprint Master is... Do you hear that music? You hear how it's sort of like the quality was kind of like dead? Yes, kill my ears a little more. Why don't you? Okay, fine. Alright, okay, yeah, 4 laps, fine. So, oh Jesus, God, just take a trek and go. Take the fucking circle, I don't care. Just get this shit over with. So you can probably tell the sounds aren't all that great. Oh, dear Lord, shit. I'll tell you one thing, the control is actually not that bad. You know, if you're a fan of like games like Super Sprint, oh, we paused there. If you're a fan of games like Super Sprint or that sort of game, so much for great control. Oh, I'm never gonna win this now. Somehow I won that. Even with the ear-raping engine sound. I'm pretty sure on the 2600 version it sounded a hell of a lot better.
Funny I should mention that because here's the 2600 version of Sprintmaster, and check out this title music. Sorry, I was drinking coffee, but that sounds a lot more pleasant actually compared to the flashback version. You know, even the beeps. And what about that engine sound? Yeah, the engine sound is still not that fantastic, to be honest with you. Also, the display is a hell of a lot dark. I'm gonna have to brighten that up in the post, but oh dear, that sounds like it's the world's longest running fart, is what it is. And control is manageable if you're good enough. Yeah, Sprintmaster in general doesn't sound great either way, but I still have to give it to the 2600 because the flashback version is still ear rape central incarnate. So, anyways, there we go.
And now we get the Warlords, the classic game of Pong, but with 4 players. Warlords, of course, uses a paddle controller, which the Atari Flashback lacks, and the although control of the paddles here is not that bad. Fortunately. Anyways, this is going to be a rather long round of Warlords, so we're going to just cut to the end here. We're going to cut to the end of the match where I'm about to emerge victorious over the evil teal-colored fortress of Warlords of Tealvania, or whatever he's warlord of, or something. This is the most intense game of Warlords you will ever see. Or maybe not, because I've cut the majority of it from the fight. So I've won the match. And we move on to another round, which we're not going to play because, well, let's just get this over with. Here we go. This is Yar's Revenge for the Atari 2600. For those of you who... Yeah, it's Yar's Revenge for the Atari 2600 on the Atari Flashback. And, sounds like crap. I'm sorry, but this sounds like crap. The 2600 version sounded a hell of a lot better. Now, I do have the game, but unfortunately, the original Yar's Revenge on the 2600 has a problem with flicker. And now you have the seizure-inducing destruction of the thing. There's proper terminology, people, but unfortunately, I'm much too tired to figure that out. In any case, you should all know what Yar's Revenge looks like. Plays pretty much the same way, the controls aren't so bad, and that's it. Let's move on to the closing thoughts right now.
Alright, so I'm just putting some of my stuff away. So all I have left is the Atari Flashback classic game console. I'm just going to leave it here on the table just to, you know, have something on screen so I could parlay my final thoughts. As I'm recording this, it just occurred to me that daylight savings has begun. We jumped ahead an hour, so instead of 2 o'clock, it's 3 in the morning, so I should probably be in bed soon, but I want to get this out of the way. I'm going to try to keep my thoughts brief because I know this part 4 is going to be long enough as it is, so... anyways, obviously, I've made a few points about this thing that are kind of negative, and the main point of contention that a lot of enthusiasts have with the original Flashback, that's not the case with the Flashback 2, 3, or 4. And I'm going to assume that those do a better job of replicating the authentic Atari experience than this thing does. But I'm only assuming because I haven't played those versions, haven't seen those versions, I only have this. I think the one point of contention that I can certainly agree with is that this thing being built on basically a plug-and-play NES clone system. That's what it is. That's the biggest big fault with this thing, is that it's an NES clone system that attempting to emulate Atari software and Atari hardware, and does a poor job of it, quite frankly. Especially in regards to some of the games. I mean, some games kinda sorta nail it, other games not so much, as I've just shown you. And, you know, in some cases it's due to the programming. Asteroids, for example, the ship with momentum in the original version and the arcade version, this thing, you move the ship, you let go of the stick, it stops right away, and that, you know, just little details like that. And then there's this thing, which is probably the worst controller that I've ever used for any games console ever, you know. And the only Pro Line controller that I have for the Atari 7800 doesn't work, but I'm willing to bet that that thing would work a hell of a lot better than this thing, because this is one of the worst controllers I have ever used, and is probably responsible for ruining a good number of games to be featured on this thing. And there's sort of like an underlying, you know, intent to showing you the comparison footage for some of these games, because, you know, I bought Crystal Castles for the Atari 2600. Unfortunately, the 2600 version of Crystal Castles wasn't the first version of the game that I played. You know, the first version of Crystal Castles I played was on the Atari Flashback, and the game played so horribly with these controllers that I naturally assumed that this game would suck a huge lemon. But eventually played this one. Didn't suck a huge lemon. It's actually pretty fun, and, you know, if you like Pac-Man like maze games where you pick up all the lines in a maze, move on to the next one, it's a pretty fun game at that, but you wouldn't know playing it off this thing. You know, and unfortunately that's a huge issue with the Flashback, is that NES clone hardware, it sounds like it sounds NES-ish. It doesn't sound like Atari, it sounds like an NES game. And certainly evident with a few games where I recognize some of the sound effects from other games, other NES games, and that sort of thing. So, I'm guessing if you've never played Atari before, you just want a cheapo plug-and-play system, unless you're willing to put up with this thing, because, like I said, you know, a long time ago, this is the only controller you could use with the Flashback. Even though this has, like, the 9-pin connectors, which... even though it has the 9-pin and this has the 9-pin, it's made specifically for this thing. You can't use your old 2600 joysticks. You can't use your Genesis joysticks or Intellivision or ColecoVision or whatever. You need to use these things because it has all the buttons you need to select your options and shit. And it's a damn shame, you know. So for a first off effort, it's kind of a disappointment. You know, but if there's one positive I could give this, one minor, kind of stretching it positive, is that it does show some love for the Atari 7800 clone. I was gonna say clone system on it. That's how late it is, folks. It does show some love for the Atari 7800 system, which is a console that I feel is underrated and underappreciated even today, because even though the system was sort of, you know, pushed aside when Nintendo was risen to power, it's still a game, you know, it didn't have a huge game library, but it had a few good games there. And it showcased a couple of those games here. And I'm kind of glad that, you know, even if it isn't a huge portion of the game, of the selection, it does showcase a bit of the Atari 7800 library and what the system could do. Unfortunately, the way they went about in recreating that experience kind of fell short. So basically, if you are an Atari enthusiast, you want to get like a plug-and-play system that replicates that authentic Atari experience perfectly, don't go with this thing. It's not going to suit your needs at all. If you're just looking for a quick plug-and-play system, that's, you know, you find this laying around for like a couple of bucks, hey, knock yourself out. But, you know, honestly, I picked this thing up because at the time, that was the closest thing I was going to get to playing Atari games. Then I got myself an Atari 7800. I never touched this thing again. probably because I was able to find a much better selection of games. So, I don't know. So yeah, that was my overview of the Atari Flashback classic game console from 2004. It's a project that I wanted to get off the ground for about 2-3 years now. I'm glad to be rid of that huge weight off my shoulders. And I don't know what I'm going to do with this thing now. I'm probably going to keep it around for a little while longer. See if there's anybody else that's really interested. It's in relatively good condition. Haven't really used it all that often. But, yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say. Flashback, served its purpose for a time in the library, but, now it just served another purpose, and that's just to give me some more subject matter for a couple videos. So, and yeah, I'm gonna end it here. It's already running long, so yeah. Anyways, thanks for watching, and till next time, take care, and good night.